Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. Please subscribe my channel. My stomach dropped before my brain caught up with what I was seeing. The key didn't turn. It didn't stick, didn't jam, it simply didn't fit. Like the lock had been replaced in the last 8 hours while I was sitting in a fluorescent-lit conference room 50 miles away, closing a deal that had, for the third consecutive quarter, kept this family's mortgage paid. I pulled the key out, stared at it. The brass was worn smooth at the tip from years of use, from 1,000 mornings and 1,000 late nights. Same key, different lock. I knocked. The porch light was on. The television was flickering blue behind the living room curtains. The two cars, my mother's silver Camry and my father's black Tacoma, were both in the driveway, engines cooling in the October chill. I knocked again. The door opened, but only partway. My mother, Eleanor Voss, stood in the gap with her cardigan pulled tight across her chest and her reading glasses pushed up onto her forehead, which meant she'd been on her phone recently. She had a particular way of holding her body when she was bracing for something. Shoulders back. Chin slightly elevated. The posture of a woman who had rehearsed this moment. Elena. He said my name the way a judge announces a verdict. My key doesn't work, I said. She nodded once. Deliberate. We had the locks changed today. Behind her, in the amber lamplight of the living room, I could see my father, Gerald Voss, standing with his arms folded and his eyes fixed on the middle distance. The particular stare of a man who has agreed to something he isn't entirely sure about but will not now retreat from. My younger sister, Brianna, was seated on the arm of the couch in the way she always sat, like she was ready to leave at any moment. She was looking at her phone. She didn't look up. And then there was Marcus. My sister's boyfriend, Marcus Hale, was standing in the kitchen doorway with a glass of red wine, watching the scene at the front door with the calm, satisfied expression of a man watching a film he'd already seen. He'd lived here for 4 months. In my old room. In the room I'd paid for. Why, I said. Not a question. A demand that sounded like one. We need to talk, my mother said. About the money. About all of it. My father finally looked at me. There are some things that have come to light, Elena. Things, I repeated. Financial things, Marcus said from the kitchen doorway. He swirled his wine once. Significant things, actually. My sister still hadn't looked up from her phone. I stood on the welcome mat, the one I'd bought at the Home Goods on Route 9 2 springs ago, the one that said home in serif letters, and I felt the cold air at my back and the warm light refusing to let me in, and I understood, with a clarity that arrived like ice water being poured over something that had been burning too long, that this was not a conversation. This was a production. And I had been cast as the defendant. My name is Elena Voss. I'm 29 years old. And this is the story of how I discovered that the people who taught me to share had been stealing from me for 3 years. And how I made sure every single one of them had to live with what they'd done for the rest of their lives. My mother stepped back from the doorway, which was her version of an invitation. I walked inside. The house smelled the same, cedar and fabric softener and the faint ghost of my father's cologne, but everything felt subtly tilted, the way familiar places do when something irreversible has just occurred in them. I set my work bag down by the door. Coat off. Hung it on the hook I'd installed myself 2 winters ago when the closet rod finally gave out and my father said he'd get to it and never did. Everyone had positioned themselves in the living room with the careful, non-accidental spacing of people who had decided their positions in advance. My mother on the love seat, upright and composed. My father on his recliner, not reclined, sitting forward with his forearms on his knees, the posture he used for serious things, for report cards, for the conversation after I'd totaled the family car at 18. Brianna on the couch, legs tucked under her now, phone finally face down on the cushion. Marcus remained standing near the kitchen doorway, leaning against the frame with his wine glass, one foot crossed lazily over the other. He looked comfortable. He looked like a man in his own home. I sat in the wingback chair across from them, the chair that had always been, by unspoken family law, nobody's in particular, and I crossed one leg over the other and I waited. My mother opened a manila folder on the coffee table. Inside I could see printed pages. Highlighted. Annotated in red pen in her handwriting. She had been a bookkeeper at a dental practice for 21 years. She knew how to make a spreadsheet look like evidence. We've been going through the household finances, she said. All right, I said. The numbers don't add up, Elena. She pushed the folder toward me. There are transfers here, From the joint account we set up for household expenses, that nobody can account for. 3 years of transfers. Into an account we don't recognize. My father cleared his throat. Thousands of dollars, Elena. Over 3 years it comes out to almost $40,000. Brianna made a sound. Not quite a gasp, not quite a word. A performance of shock. Marcus took a slow sip of wine. Who found this? I asked. Marcus noticed something irregular, my mother said. He's been helping us get organized. Has he? I said. He was doing us a kindness, my father said with a firmness that told me he had already decided this was true. I looked at the printed pages. I recognized the account numbers. I recognized every single transaction. I had entered every single one of them with my mother's full knowledge and consent. Over the course of 3 years of managing her medical expenses, my father's business insurance lapses, and the mortgage arrears that had, on 2 separate occasions, put this house within 60 days of foreclosure. The account they didn't recognize was the operating account for Voss Financial Services, the name I had given 3 years ago to the small consulting work I'd taken on specifically to generate the additional income this family needed. It's registered to a business entity, he said. Voss Financial. Which is interesting because none of us knew you had a company. I set the page down. I looked at Marcus Hale for a long, unhurried moment. He had a pleasant face, symmetrical, well-maintained, the face of a man who understood that appearance was a resource and spent accordingly. He'd been dating Brianna for 14 months. He had arrived in this house 4 months ago with 3 duffel bags and a half-finished online certification in something he described, when asked, as financial strategy. He was 26 years old and had not, to anyone's knowledge, held a job for longer than 5 months. Marcus, I said pleasantly, how did you access our joint account records? A small pause. Brianna showed me. And Brianna has access to the joint account because I added her, my mother said quickly. Last year. In case of emergency. Right. I nodded. In case of emergency. Elena, my father said, leaning forward further, his voice dropping into the register he reserved for finality. We need an explanation. We need to understand where $40,000 went. This is our home. This is our retirement. If someone has been taking from you, I said. Yes, he said. If someone has been taking from you. Silence settled like sediment over the room. I looked at the folder. I looked at my mother's red pen annotations. I looked at Marcus Hale's wine glass. I looked at Brianna's face-down phone and her carefully arranged expression of injured confusion. And I thought about the folder on my laptop. The one I'd been adding to for 8 months. The one titled simply Contingency. I stood up. I picked up my coat from the hook by the door. I'm going to need a few days, I said. Elena, my mother started. You changed the locks, I said with my coat already over my arm. So clearly the urgency here isn't a conversation. It's a decision. And if a decision has already been made, then I don't need to be here tonight. I picked up my work bag. I'll be in touch. Where are you going? My father asked. I looked at him. At the man who had taught me to balance a checkbook, who had held my hand on my first day of school, who was sitting in a recliner he couldn't have kept if I hadn't found a way to restructure his small business debt 2 years ago. To get some rest, I said. I've been working. I walked out. The door closed behind me with the quiet, definitive click of a new lock finding its seat. I stood on the porch for exactly 5 seconds. Then I smiled, not the kind anyone inside would have wanted to see. Because they thought they were unwinding 3 years of mystery. They had no idea they'd just pulled the first thread of their own unraveling. I drove to the Marriott on Route 17, 14 miles from the house, clean rooms, reliable Wi-Fi, and I checked in for 3 nights with the business card my consulting work had earned me status on. The front desk clerk, a young man with careful eyebrows, gave me a room on the 7th floor with a view of the highway overpass and a bathroom with white marble tile and those small bottles of soap that smell aggressively clean. I ordered room service. Simon. A glass of Sauvignon Blanc. And I opened my laptop. I should explain something. I need to back up about 3 years because none of what happened on that porch with that folder with my mother's red pen annotations and Marcus Hale's borrowed self-satisfaction, none of that arrives without context. Context is everything. Context is, as it turned out, the only real weapon I was ever going to need. My parents bought the house on Crestfield Drive in 2003. 4 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a quarter acre in a suburb that was nice enough when they bought it and had stayed exactly that. Nice enough. My father, Gerald, had run a small HVAC business for 20 years. Nothing spectacular but steady enough. My mother, Eleanor, had done the books for Dr. Stephen Park's dental practice on Oak Avenue since I was in middle school. They were not rich people, but they were stable people, which is its own kind of wealth. I grew up understanding that stability was something you maintained. You showed up. You worked. You were careful with money. I had internalized this so thoroughly that by the time I was 22, freshly graduated with a degree in accounting and a minor in business law, I was already freelancing, preparing tax returns, doing small business bookkeeping, tutoring finance students on evenings and weekends. By 24, I had enough clients that I registered the business. Voss Financial Services. Policy. One woman, a laptop, and a filing system that would have made a forensic accountant weep with satisfaction. The trouble started, as trouble often does in families, quietly. 3 years ago in early November, my father called me on a Tuesday evening and told me, with the particular tone of a man reading from a script he'd written and then immediately regretted, that the business had some cash flow problems. Some tax arrears. Some irregular payments from 2 commercial clients who had, he said, gone quiet. The amount owed to the IRS was $23,400. He said he had a plan. He said I shouldn't worry. He did not have a plan. 6 weeks later, my mother called me at work and told me in a voice carefully emptied of drama that the mortgage payment had bounced. Not just fallen behind, bounced. And that this was the 2nd month in a row. I came home that weekend. I sat at the kitchen table with both of them and I went through every account, every statement, every credit card bill. It took most of Saturday and all of Saturday evening. My father sat with his arms folded and his jaw set in the particular expression of a man who is allowing himself to be helped and hates every second of it. My mother made coffee twice and kept apologizing for things that weren't her fault. When I was done, the picture was clear. They were $67,000 in various forms of debt, and the mortgage, the house, the place they'd lived for 20 years, the place that held everything that mattered to them, was 61 days from foreclosure. I can fix this, I told them. My father said he didn't want me to do that. My mother said, Gerald. And he said nothing else. Over the following 18 months I fixed it. I restructured the IRS debt into a payment plan. I negotiated with 2 of the delinquent commercial clients directly, recovering $14,000 in outstanding invoices. I moved my own savings, not all of it but a significant and deliberate portion, into the mortgage arrears. And I set up the joint account, a shared operating account that I managed, into which I deposited a fixed monthly transfer from Voss Financial, and from which all the household expenses, the mortgage, the insurance, the utilities were paid on time, every time like clockwork. I did not do this from a position of martyrdom. I want to be clear about that. I did it because I was the person in the family who was capable of doing it, because the alternative was watching my parents lose the only thing they had, and because, and this is the part one have spent a lot of time examining since, I believed that what I was doing was understood. That it was seen. That the people I was doing it for knew exactly what was happening and why. I was wrong about that last part. Not about my parents exactly. Not at first. My mother knew. She knew every transfer, every decision, every account. She had sat at that kitchen table and watched me open the Voss Financial operating account on my laptop. She had the login. I had shown her how to read the statements. But somewhere over 3 years the knowing had been renegotiated. And I had a very specific theory about when that renegotiation had started. About 4.5 months ago, when Marcus Hale had arrived with 3 duffel bags and moved into my old bedroom and begun, with the patient, methodical energy of a man who understood that the best long-term investments are in other people's blind spots, to make himself indispensable. I poured the last inch of my Sauvignon Blanc. I opened the folder on my laptop. The one titled Contingency. I had not been idle. That was the thing about Marcus. He was good at what he did, but he had made one miscalculation that was, in my professional experience, extremely common among people who believe they are the smartest person in a room they entered without permission. He thought I wasn't paying attention. The folder had been started 8 months ago. Not because I'd suspected Marcus specifically. At that point he'd been dating Brianna for 6 months and I'd met him twice. No, I'd started the folder because something had changed in my mother's behavior around the household account, and I am, professionally and temperamentally, the kind of person who documents things that change without explanation. The first thing I'd noticed was that my mother had begun asking unusual questions about the joint account structure. Questions she'd never asked before. Questions framed in the particular way of someone who has been briefed by a third party. Not the natural wandering curiosity of a person trying to understand something, but the precise, targeted inquiry of someone repeating a script. Why can't we see the Voss financial account directly? Why doesn't the money come in under your name? Is this a normal arrangement, or is this something you set up for a specific reason? Normal questions on the surface. But my mother had understood the arrangement for 3 years. She'd approved it. She'd been grateful for it. I noted the date. I noted the exact phrasing. I created the folder. Over the following 8 months, I had gathered the following, organized into subfolders with dates and source documentation. The first subfolder contained screenshots of a series of texts between my sister Brianna and Marcus, captured from Brianna's iCloud backup, to which I had access because Brianna had 2 years prior locked herself out of her Apple account and I had set it up again under a family sharing arrangement that she had never bothered to update or review. These texts, spanning from approximately 6 months ago to the week before the lock change, showed Marcus coaching Brianna on how to position the financial arrangement to their parents. Phrases like, "Don't call it managing, call it controlling," and "the key is to make them feel like they never had access to their own money," and most helpfully, "Once your mom is convinced it was intentional, your dad will follow." The second subfolder contained the results of a standard background check I had run on Marcus Jerome Hale, age 26. Most recently of Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. The background check, which I had paid a licensed investigator named Dana Cho a flat fee of $800 to compile, revealed 3 things that Marcus had not shared with the Voss family. A civil judgment from 2022 for $11,000 related to a fraud claim filed by a former landlord. A dismissed, but documented, complaint filed with the Pennsylvania Attorney General's Consumer Protection Division by a woman named Renata Osei, alleging that Marcus had defrauded her elderly mother of $6,200 under the pretense of investment consulting, and most recently a 2024 small claims filing in New Jersey, still active, in which a woman named Christine Daly alleged that Marcus Hale had borrowed $3,500 from her and moved without repayment. The third subfolder was the most interesting. It contained, in chronological order, documentation of Marcus's attempts to access financial information he was not authorized to access. These included a request he had made, through Brianna, using Brianna's phone number, to the joint account's host bank, attempting to add himself as an authorized user. The bank had denied this request and flagged it, and because I was the primary account holder, I had received the notification. I had screenshotted it, named it, dated it and filed it. That had been 4 months ago, 1 week after Marcus moved in. I had not acted on it immediately. I had waited. Because there is a specific kind of person who benefits from patience in exactly the same proportion that a specific other kind of person is damaged by it. And I had been very, very patient. The fourth subfolder contained the documentation I had spent the most time compiling. Over 3 years, I had maintained meticulous records of every financial decision I had made on behalf of my parents. Every transfer, every payment, every negotiation. I had the original email chain in which my mother had explicitly authorized the Voss financial arrangement. I had the signed agreement, 2 pages witnessed by my accountant Philip Okafor at Okafor and Associates on Meridian Street, in which both my parents had acknowledged the structure of the account and their consent to it. I had the IRS payment plan documentation listing me as the authorized representative. I had the mortgage restructuring agreement. I had, in short, a complete, chronological, professionally organized record of 3 years of decisions that had saved this family's home. I had all of this because I am an accountant. As I document things. Because I was 26 years old when I started doing this and I knew even then that money and family in the same space is a combustible combination and that the only protection against combustion is paper. I had not known when I created that documentation that I would ever need to use it the way I was now preparing to use it. But I was not, as I told you, unprepared. I finished my wine. I opened a new email and composed a short message to Philip Okafor, my accountant and the witness on the original agreement. I asked him for his earliest available appointment in the next 2 days. I opened a second email and sent a similarly brief message to a woman named Catherine Solis, of Solis and McBride LLP on 4th Avenue downtown. Catherine specialized in family financial disputes and elder financial abuse law. I had found her 3 months ago. I had sent her a preliminary summary of the situation. I had a consultation already scheduled for the following week. I moved it up. Then I closed my laptop. I set the alarm for 6:30. The room was very white and very quiet, and the highway overpass outside had a low, steady hum that was almost meditative. I slept better than I had in months. I called my mother at 8 the following morning. She answered on the second ring, which meant she had been waiting. "I want to meet," I said. "You, Dad, and me. Neutral location. No Marcus." Pause. "Marcus is part of this family." "He's your daughter's boyfriend of 14 months, I said evenly. "He is not part of this. If you want to have this conversation, it's the three of us. If Marcus is in the room, I'll be leaving, and the next time you hear from me it will be through Catherine Solis at Solis and McBride." Another pause. Longer. "Who is that?" "My attorney," I said. "Your choice, Mom." I heard her breathing. I heard her cover the phone with her hand and say something muffled to someone in the room with her. "Gerald's Diner," she said finally. 11 o'clock. "I'll be there at 10:55, I said. I wore the charcoal blazer. The one I'd bought for client presentations, structured, professional, the exact visual language of a person who is not in trouble. I brought my work bag, which contained my laptop and a printed copy of a specific selection of documents from the contingency folder, organized in a manila envelope in the same way my mother had organized her accusations. Dated, highlighted, annotated. Gerald's Diner on Whitmore Avenue had the kind of interior that hadn't changed since 1987. Red vinyl booths, a Formica counter, a glass pie display that rotated slowly under yellowed lighting. My parents were already there when I arrived. My father in his weekend jacket, looking like a man who had slept poorly. My mother with her hands wrapped around a coffee mug, her reading glasses on her nose now, which meant she had not been on her phone recently and was therefore not in performance mode. I slid into the booth across from them. I ordered coffee. "But thank you for coming," I said. "Elena," my father started. "Dad," I said, "let me go first. Because I think you deserve to understand what you actually have before you decide what you want to do with it." He closed his mouth. I placed the manila envelope on the Formica table between us. "Everything I'm about to show you," I said, "is documented. Dated. Some of it is signed by both of you. I need you to look at it before you say anything. Can you do that?" My mother set down her coffee mug. I opened the envelope. The first document was the signed agreement. 2 pages, both their signatures at the bottom, Philip Okafor's notary stamp in the corner. I slid it across. My mother looked at it for a long moment. The color in her face did a slow, complicated thing. "You know what that is," I said quietly. She nodded barely. "Say it," I said. Not cruelly. Just cleanly. "It's the arrangement," she said. "The account." "The arrangement you agreed to," I said. "That you signed 3 years ago at Philip's office on Meridian Street. You wore the blue blouse with the white buttons. He offered you tea. You said you preferred coffee." My father was looking at his wife with an expression I had never seen on his face before. "Eleanor," he said. "I know what it says," she said softly. "Then you know," I said, "that there is no theft. There is no unexplained money. There is a 3-year financial arrangement that you authorized, that you signed, and that you understood completely until approximately 4 months ago when someone moved into this house and began explaining it to you differently." I placed the second document on the table. It was a printed bank statement for the joint account, 3 years of it, with every transfer from Voss Financial highlighted in green. Below each cluster of transfers, I had printed the corresponding household expense it had covered: mortgage payment, insurance premium, IRS installment. Total transferred in from Voss Financial over 3 years, $43,200. Total in household expenses covered, $43,200. Variance, 0. Not a single dollar, I said, went anywhere other than this house. My father picked up the statement. He looked at it for a long time. His jaw was working. "Then why," he started. Because someone told you to look at it differently, I said. I placed the third document on the table. And this is who that someone is. The background check summary was 3 pages. I had clipped a sticky note to the first page with 3 lines. Civil Judgment, Fraud, 2022. AG Consumer Complaint, Elder Financial Abuse, 2023. Active Small Claims, Money Borrowed/Abandoned, 2024. My father read it. He read it slowly with the focused attention of a man who is revising a large number of things simultaneously. My mother did not pick it up. She was looking at the table. The person who found the irregularity, I said, has a documented history of identifying financial arrangements in other people's families and repositioning the narrative around them for personal benefit. I want you to sit with that. The silence in the red vinyl booth was absolute. I drank my coffee. I let everything I had just said settle. Why didn't you tell us? My father asked finally. His voice was different now. Quieter. About Marcus. If you knew. Because I needed you to be the ones to see it, I said. Not me. If I'd come to you 3 months ago and said, your daughter's boyfriend is a con artist, what would have happened? He was quiet for a moment. Then, with the particular honesty of a man who is reckoning with himself in real time, we would have defended him. Yes, I said. You would have. So I waited until you came to me. My mother made a sound. Small. Compressed. I looked at her. Not with anger. I want to be honest about this. I had spent 8 months preparing for this conversation and none of that preparation had been fueled by rage. Rage makes you sloppy. What I felt was something colder and more precise. The absolute certainty that I was right and the absolute commitment to making sure that rightness was documented, witnessed, and irrefutable. Mom, I said. I know. She looked up. Her eyes were wet. I know you know, I said. That's why I'm here and not in Catherine Solis's office. I picked up my coffee. I took a sip. I let the implications settle over the diner like weather. So, I said, here's what happens next. They thought they were unwinding 3 years of mystery. They had no idea they'd just unlocked the door I'd been building behind the one they'd changed. Catherine Solis's office was on the 14th floor of a building on 4th Avenue with a lobby of gray marble and a reception desk staffed by a woman who moved with the unhurried efficiency of someone who had seen every possible kind of family dissolution and had opinions about none of them. The elevator opened into a hallway of dark walnut paneling and framed degrees and the hushed, carpeted quiet of a place where serious things were addressed with serious tools. Catherine herself was 43, compact and precise, with close-cropped natural hair and the demeanor of a person who had learned very early that the most powerful thing in a room was controlled information. She wore steel-rimmed glasses that she removed when she wanted you to understand that what she was about to say was important. She wore them now as I sat across from her in a leather chair with my laptop open on the glass coffee table between us, but she would remove them 3 times before we were done. My parents were not there. We had agreed at Gerald's diner that the formal meeting would be between me, my attorney, and Marcus Hale. My parents' presence was to be neutral, witnesses in effect to whatever transpired. My mother had suggested quietly over the last of her coffee that she thought this was fair. My father had not said much since reading the background check, but when I'd stood up to leave he had caught my arm. Elena. He'd held on for a moment. Then, I'm sorry. 2 words. But he meant them. I knew he meant them because my father doesn't deploy apologies easily. They cost him something. I know, Dad, I'd said. We'll sort it out. I had called Dana Cho, my investigator, on the drive from the diner. I had asked her one additional question. Whether in her research on Marcus Hale, she had found any evidence of a current business relationship with anyone in my family's financial network. She had called back 3 hours later. She had. This is the piece I had not known. This is the piece that elevated what was already a strong case into something else entirely. Marcus Hale had, approximately 2 months prior, contacted my father's former HVAC business, which my father had quietly reactivated on a small scale the previous year, doing residential service calls, and had, representing himself as a financial consultant, offered Gerald Voss a restructuring proposal. The proposal, which I had now obtained a copy of through Dana, involved my father signing over the management authority of the business's finances to an LLC called Hale Strategic Partners, a company registered in Delaware 4 months ago. The proposal had been presented as a favor as Marcus helping out with the family. My father, to his credit and his good fortune, had not signed it. But he had not told anyone about it either because Marcus had told him it was a preliminary document, informal, not worth mentioning yet. I shared this with Catherine now. She removed her glasses for the first time. This changes the nature of the meeting, she said. I know, I said. This isn't just a family dispute about a household account anymore, she said. If he was targeting the business while simultaneously undermining the existing financial arrangement. It's a coordinated attempt, I said. Yes. How long have you had this? 24 hours, I said. Dana found it yesterday afternoon. Catherine looked at the document I'd passed her. The Hale Strategic Partners proposal, printed on letterhead that used Gerald Voss's business name in its header without authorization. She read it in the careful, systematic way of a person who is constructing an argument while reading. I want him to know, Catherine said slowly, that we have this. But I want him to find out in the room. Not before. Agreed, I said. And your parents? They're coming as witnesses. They'll be there, I said. My mother has already agreed. My father will be there because I asked him to be and he owes me. The corners of Catherine's mouth did something precise. Good. Let's talk about how this goes. The meeting was set for 2 days later, a Thursday at 10 in the morning. Catherine's office had a formal conference room on the same floor. A long table of lacquered walnut, 8 chairs in dark leather. A wall of windows that looked out over the city with the gray, impartial light of an overcast Thursday in October. There was a sideboard with coffee and water and a ceramic bowl of wrapped peppermints that no one was going to touch. I arrived 20 minutes early. I wore the charcoal blazer again, this time with a cream silk blouse and my grandmother's pearl studs. Small, understated, the visual language of a woman who has nothing to prove. Catherine was already there, reviewing her documents at the head of the table. Philip Okafor, my accountant who had agreed to attend as a supporting witness, was seated to her left in his good suit, his own folder open. To Catherine's right was Dana Cho, present at my request, available to speak to the investigative findings if challenged. My parents arrived at 5 to 10. My mother in her good coat, hands clasped, eyes steady but carrying the particular exhausted quality of someone who has not slept well in several days. My father in his business jacket, the one he'd worn when he'd first opened his company 20 years ago and still brought out for things that mattered. He shook Philip Okafor's hand. He nodded at Catherine. He sat down beside my mother at the far end of the table without looking at me, which I understood and did not take personally. Marcus and Brianna arrived at 2 minutes past 10. Brianna was dressed in a way she never dressed. Blazer, silk blouse, heels that struck the hallway floor like a metronome before she walked through the door. She had done her hair. She looked, in other words, like she was trying to look like me, which was either unconscious or deliberate and was, in either case, interesting. Marcus wore a dark suit. He'd had it pressed. He was carrying a slim leather portfolio, the kind you buy at an office supply store to look like you have documents. He looked around the room when he entered with the quick, assessing scan of a man gauging his position, taking inventory of who was present, who was unexpected, what it meant. His eyes landed on Dana Cho and stayed there for 1 second too long before moving on. He did not know who she was. But he knew she was not decorative. Miss Solis, he said in the warm, capable tone of a man presenting himself as reasonable. Thank you for the space. I think we can clear this up pretty quickly. Catherine looked at him with an expression of such complete professional neutrality that it was, in its own way, devastating. Please sit down, Mr. Hale. He sat. Brianna sat beside him. She reached for the water pitcher and poured 2 glasses with the practiced composure of a woman who was performing calm she didn't feel. Catherine removed her glasses. We're here, she said, to address a series of claims made in the last 72 hours regarding the financial management of the Voss family household account. My client, Elena Voss, has asked me to present the complete picture. Not the partial picture that initiated this meeting, but the full evidentiary record. After that presentation, we'll be discussing next steps. I'll ask everyone to hold questions until I've finished. Marcus nodded pleasantly. Brianna did not look at me. Let's start with what actually happened, Catherine said. She opened her folder. Philip Okafor spoke first. He had a voice like a patient teacher. Measured, warm, precise. And he walked through the 3-year financial history of the Voss household the way an architect describes a building they designed, with the specific proprietary knowledge of someone who built the thing and therefore cannot be confused about its structure. He presented the signed agreement. He presented the account statements. He presented the correspondence, emails dated with red receipts, in which my mother had been kept informed of every transfer, every payment, every decision. He used a small clicker to advance slides on the wall-mounted screen at the end of the table. Each slide was a document. Each document was dated, sourced, signed where applicable. As he presented the second slide, Marcus Hale's hand, which had been resting flat and relaxed on the lacquered walnut table, contracted slightly. Fingers drawing toward palm. Not a fist. An adjustment. A recalibration. At the third slide, the complete transfer log with every Voss financial payment matched to its corresponding household expense, Brianna stopped reaching for her water glass. She placed her hands in her lap. He was very still. Total household benefit over 36 months, Philip said, amounts to $43,200. Every dollar accounted for, matched and documented. That's, Marcus started. Mr. Hale, Catherine said without looking at him. I'll ask you to wait. He closed his mouth. She removed her glasses again. She did it with the deliberateness of a surgeon setting down a tool. Now, she said, I want to address the claim that precipitated this meeting, the claim that irregular transfers represented potential financial misconduct. I want to address where that claim originated and why. She nodded at Dana Cho. Dana opened her own folder. She did not have slides. She had printed pages which she passed around the table one at a time, in the way of someone who wants each document to be seen individually and therefore felt individually. The first page was the background check summary. My parents had already seen it. My parents' faces were composed. They had done their grieving over this information in the previous 48 hours. Brianna had not seen it. He picked it up. She read the first line. The color in her face changed in the specific rapid way of someone who has just been told something they were afraid of knowing. Civil judgment for fraud, Dana said professionally. 2022 filed in Cumberland County, Pennsylvania. Mr. Hale, do you want to speak to that? That was a landlord dispute, he said evenly. It was dismissed on. It was not dismissed, Dana said. Judgment was entered against you. I have the court record. He passed it across the table. Second item, consumer protection complaint, filed with the Pennsylvania AG's office in 2023 by a Renata Osei on behalf of her mother, Abina Osei, age 71. Alleging that you represented yourself as a financial consultant and collected $6,200 for investment services that were never rendered. That complaint was closed without prosecution due to insufficient resources, not insufficient evidence. I have the complaint documentation. Another page passed across. Third item, active small claims case in Bergen County, New Jersey, filed in March of this year. Christine Daly, $3,500. The room was quiet. Marcus Hale's face had not drained of color so much as it had settled into a new and more guarded arrangement. He was recalculating. You could see it. The way a chess player's eyes go slightly unfocused when they're running through sequences 3 moves ahead. Brianna was looking at the background check with the expression of a person who wants to say something but hasn't yet decided what. These are, Marcus started. We're not done, Catherine said. She produced a document from her own folder. She slid it down the table toward Marcus. Mr. Hale. Can you tell me about Hale Strategic Partners, LLC? The chess player's eyes stopped moving. It's a consulting business, he said. I'm in the process of. Registered in Delaware for months ago, Catherine said. The same week you moved into the Voss residence. I have the incorporation documents. She placed them beside the first document. And I have this. She placed a third document beside that. The Hale Strategic Partners proposal. My father's business name in the header. The Management Authority clause on page 2, highlighted in yellow. Would you like to explain what you were proposing to do with Gerald Voss's business, Mr. Hale? Bearing in mind that Gerald Voss is present in this room. My father was looking at Marcus with the expression of a man who has just reclassified something. Marcus looked at the document. He looked at it for a long moment. His jaw moved once, the muscles working, and then he did something I found genuinely interesting. He straightened in his chair and said with a remarkable recovery of composure, "That was a preliminary discussion between me and Gerald, informal, exploratory. There was no intent." "Gerald," Catherine said, turning to my father. "Was this document presented to you as exploratory and informal?" My father said quietly and clearly. He told me it was a standard first step. That it was how consultants always structured things. "He used the word consultants," Catherine said. "Yes," my father said. "The same word he used to describe himself to Abina Osei in 2023. The room went still again. It was Brianna who broke it. "Marcus," she said, quietly, in the voice of someone who has just arrived, after a very long journey, at a place they didn't want to go. "What is this?" He turned to her. He had good eyes for this kind of moment. Warm, earnest, the exact calibration of sincerity required. "Bree, this is." "Don't," she said. The word landed cleanly. "My name is on things," he said. "My name is attached to a fraud claim that was." "3 things," I said. I had not spoken since the meeting began. My voice in the quiet of the room was even and clear. "Your name is attached to 3 things, Marcus. Across 3 different states. Over 4 years. And the one thing those 3 things have in common is that they all involved you inserting yourself into someone else's family financial situation and attempting to redirect the flow of money." I looked at him. How many families before ours? He met my eyes. I let the silence run. "Here's what I want you to understand," I said, still calmly, still without raising my voice. "The account you told my parents was suspicious. I set it up with their full knowledge and consent. It kept this family's house. I have the documentation." I tapped the folder in front of me once. "The business proposal you quietly presented to my father. I have that too. The texts you sent my sister coaching her on how to present the situation to my parents. I have those as well." Brianna's head turned toward me. "Foley, your iCloud backup has been on a family sharing arrangement for 2 years," I said to her, not unkindly. "You never changed it." She stared at me. Marcus's hand on the table was completely flat now. All the casual ease had left his posture. He was sitting in a dark suit in a leather chair in a 14th-floor conference room, and the performance he had spent 4 months constructing had just been disassembled piece by piece in front of the audience he'd built it for. Catherine put her glasses back on. "Mr. Hale," she said, "here is what we're prepared to do. You will vacate the Voss residence within 72 hours, taking all personal property. You will have no further contact with any member of the Voss family for a period of no less than 12 months, to be specified in a written agreement. You will sign a statement acknowledging that the Voss financial arrangement was legitimate and authorized, which my client reserves the right to use in any future proceedings." She paused. "In exchange, my client will not file a formal complaint with the New Jersey Attorney General regarding your activities in this state, and will not provide her documentation to the attorney already representing Christine Daly in the Bergen County case." She let the last part settle. "We'll need your answer today," she said. "We have a filing prepared." Marcus sat in the dark leather chair and looked at the table. Brianna was looking at her hands. "Brianna," my mother said, stiffly. "The way you say a name when you're looking for the person in it." Brianna looked up. Her eyes were bright. She looked for the first time since I'd arrived at the Voss house to find my key didn't fit the lock like my sister. Not like the composed accomplice in the blazer who'd arrived at this meeting, but like the 24-year-old who still called me to ask which Tylenol to buy when she had a headache. "He told me the money was suspicious," she said. Her voice was thin. "He sat in the kitchen every night for weeks going over the statements and he kept saying it didn't add up and She stopped. "I believed him." "I know," I said. "I should have asked you." "Yes," I said. "Not cruel. Just true." Marcus had not looked up from the table. "Your answer, Mr. Hale," Catherine said. He reached forward. He picked up the agreement. He read it with the focused attention of a man who is looking for exits that aren't there. He read it twice. Then he picked up the pen that Catherine had placed at the end of the table, and he signed it with the compact, expressionless motion of a man who is not accustomed to being beaten but knows when he is. I watched him sign it. I did not feel triumph. I felt something quieter and more durable, the satisfaction of a structure holding under load. of preparation meeting its moment. He pushed the agreement back to Catherine. "You know," I said pleasantly as I gathered my documents back into my folder, "you were very good at this. You read people well. You identified the gaps in a family's knowledge of their own finances and you moved into them. That's a real skill." I closed the folder. I looked at him directly. "Next time, make sure the person you're doing it to isn't a forensic accountant." I stood up. "Thank you, Catherine," I said. "Philip. Dana." I looked at my parents. "I'll call you tonight." I picked up my bag. I walked out of the conference room and down the walnut-paneled hallway to the elevator. The doors closed. I looked at my reflection in the polished steel. I straightened my blazer. That was it. 3 months later. The October that had started everything was now a memory, a cold file in the contingency folder I had renamed closed and moved to archive. November had come and gone in the specific amber-lit way of late autumn in the Northeast. Early darkness, the smell of wood smoke and wet leaves, the feeling that the year is completing a thought. December had arrived with the quiet efficiency of a season that has things to do. And on a Tuesday morning in the second week of December, I sat in the kitchen of an apartment I had signed a lease on in early November. 2 bedrooms, the second of which I used as an office, on the 3rd floor of a building on Clement Street with a bay window that looked out over a row of maple trees currently bare and beautiful in the winter light. And I made coffee in the French press I'd bought as a moving-in gift to myself, and I watched the gray morning light change to something warmer. And I felt, in a way that was not dramatic and was therefore entirely real, good. The apartment smelled like fresh paint and the specific clean neutrality of a space that has no history in it yet, only future. The walls were white. The furniture was mostly mine, the pieces I'd had in storage when I'd been living at the Voss house for those 2 years, plus a few new things. A green velvet armchair that I'd spotted in the window of a vintage store on Halsey Street and bought on the spot because it looked like exactly the kind of chair a person sits in when they're thinking, and a set of bookshelves I'd built myself from flat pack over a long, satisfying Sunday afternoon with a glass of white wine and a podcast about financial crimes. I called it privately the finishing school. Not for other people. For me. I poured my coffee. I pulled my cardigan closer. The good one, cashmere gray, bought from a sample sale 2 years ago and saved for mornings worth it. I sat in the green velvet armchair by the bay window and I watched the maples. Marcus Hale had vacated the Voss house within 40 hours of signing the agreement, 2 hours ahead of the 72-hour deadline, a detail that suggested either that he had somewhere else to go or that he understood, in the specific way of someone who has lost cleanly, that the fastest exit was the best one. He'd taken the 3 duffel bags and added a rolling suitcase and left without a farewell to my parents, which my father told me over the phone with a particular tone. Not quite contempt, not quite relief, somewhere in between. The Hale Strategic Partners LLC had been voluntarily dissolved the following week. Dana Cho had confirmed this for me. Delaware keeps efficient records. The Christine Daly case in Bergen County had reached a resolution in late November. Marcus had paid the $3,500. I hadn't provided anything to Christine's attorney. I hadn't needed to. It seemed the arrival of the agreement at Catherine Solis's office, and the specific knowledge that someone was paying professional attention to Marcus Hale's activities, had been sufficient to clarify his priorities. Renata Osei had contacted me. This I had not expected. She'd found my name through the AG's complaint system. My contact with Catherine had apparently triggered a review of the original Osei complaint, and a paralegal had reached out. I'd spoken with Renata on the phone for 35 minutes, and she told me about her mother, Abina, who was 71 and had been told by a charming young man that he could triple her modest savings in 18 months, and had given him money she'd saved for years and had never seen it again. I'd sent everything I had to the AG's office. The case had been reopened as of December 3rd. I thought about Abina Osei sometimes, in the way you think about a person you've never met but feel a complicated, asymmetric responsibility toward. I hoped she'd get her money back. I thought she probably wouldn't, but I hoped. My phone buzzed on the armchair's arm. A text from my friend Priya Nair, who had been my college roommate and was now a paralegal at a different firm downtown. The person who had spent the last 2 months functioning as a one-woman intelligence service on the subject of Marcus Hale's post-Voss activities. "You awake?" she sent. Since 6 I sent back. "Already made. Come over." She arrived 20 minutes later in her work coat with a pastry bag from the French bakery on Clement that I had not yet tried but had been meaning to. She sat on my couch and pulled her boots off and tucked her feet under her and said without preamble, "You won't believe who I ran into at the courthouse yesterday." "Tell me," I said. "Brianna," she said. I set my coffee down. "She was there filing paperwork," Priya said. "Turns out she hired a lawyer. Small claims. Suing Marcus for $2,000 she lent him in September." She raised her eyebrows. "He borrowed from her too, apparently. Before the whole thing collapsed." I absorbed this. "Good for her," I said, and I meant it. "She asked about you," Priya said. "I told her you were good." She picked up her coffee cup. She said she was sorry. I looked at the maples through the bay window. Bare branches against the December sky. Precise and architectural. "I know she is," I said. My mother had called me every 3 days since the meeting. Not to relitigate. That was done. My mother was many things, but she was not a person who relitigated when the evidence was conclusive. He called to talk. About the house. About my father's business, which was having a quietly good quarter. About the recipe she'd made on Sunday. About nothing in particular, which is to say about everything that mattered. Our relationship was not restored to what it had been. It had been reformed into something more honest, which is a different and more durable thing. My father had called once for a long time on a Sunday evening. He told me the full story of the Hale Strategic Partners proposal from his perspective. How Marcus had presented it, how he'd framed it, how my father had almost signed it before something he couldn't name had made him put the papers down. He told me about the night he'd agreed to change the locks. He told me he had believed he was protecting the family. "I know," I said. "I was wrong about what the threat was," he said. "You were," I said. "But you weren't wrong to want to protect things. You just had the wrong information." I paused. "Someone made sure you had the wrong information." He was quiet for a moment. "You protected us anyway. You're my parents," I said. As if that was all the explanation required. It was. As for Voss Financial Services, the LLC that Marcus had tried to reframe as a scheme, the entity built from 3 years of evening work and weekend clients and careful, meticulous labor, it was having its best quarter since founding. The clarity of the past 3 months had paradoxically made me sharper. When you've had to justify every decision you've ever made in a formal setting with documentation in front of an attorney, you lose any remaining tolerance for vagueness. Every engagement was clean. Every agreement was written. Every dollar was accounted for. I had also, in the 6 weeks since moving into the Clement Street apartment, taken on 2 new clients through referrals. One of them from Renata Osei's family, who had asked if I worked with elderly clients on protective financial arrangements. I did now. And I had begun in the evenings in the green velvet armchair to write a guide. Not a book, not yet. A practical resource for people navigating family financial arrangements, specifically for adult children supporting aging parents. How to document. How to structure. How to protect yourself and the people you love from the specific, insidious vulnerability that lives in the space between generosity and oversight. I was going to publish it in the spring. Catherine had agreed to contribute a legal appendix. Dana Cho was writing a section on investigative resources. Priya was eating her pastry. She was looking out the bay window at the same maples I'd been watching. "You know what's funny?" she said. "What?" "He thought he was taking something from you," she said. "And instead he basically built your entire next chapter." I looked at the maples. Their bare, precise lines against the gray December sky. "Yes," I said. "He did." On a Friday evening 6 weeks later, in the long blue-gold hour before full dark, I was sitting on the small balcony of my Clement Street apartment with a glass of wine, Sauvignon Blanc, the same one I'd ordered at the Marriott on the night that had started all of this. And the city was doing the thing it does on clear winter evenings when the lights come up before the sky fully darkens, so for a few minutes everything is lit from both above and below, like the world is briefly luminous from all directions. My phone showed a message from a number I didn't have saved. I opened it. "Hi Elena. It's Brianna. I'm downstairs. I have coffee. You don't have to let me up if you don't want to, but I wanted to try." I looked at the message for a moment. I typed back. "Door code is 1107. 3rd floor." She arrived in the way she always arrived anywhere. A little breathless, slightly overprepared, carrying more than was strictly necessary. She had 2 coffees from the French bakery and a small paper bag, and the expression of a person who has rehearsed an apology many times and is now uncertain whether to use the rehearsed version or to abandon it entirely. I stood in the doorway of my apartment. My sister looked at me from the hallway. She was wearing a coat I'd never seen. Dark green wool, good quality, the kind of deliberate purchase you make when you're starting over and you want the starting over to be visible. Her eyes were tired in the specific way of someone who has spent 2 months dismantling something and is only now beginning to see what the space might be used for instead. I should have asked you, she said. Not the rehearsed version. The true version. You should have, I said. He was very convincing. I know. I've read the file on him. A small, fragile sound, not quite a laugh but the structure of one. Can I come in? I stepped back from the doorway. She came in. She looked around the apartment. The white walls, the green velvet chair, the bookshelves, the bay window with the city lights beginning to glow in the winter dark. He handed me one of the coffees. We stood in my kitchen, which was small and clean and mine, and I poured wine into 2 glasses and handed her one. You built something, she said, looking at the shelves. I'm building something, I said. She nodded. She held the wine glass the way our mother holds a mug, both hands like it might be needed for warmth. We moved to the balcony. The city was fully lit now, the earlier blue gold having resolved into the hard, warm orange of a winter evening, the kind of light that makes everything look deliberate. We leaned on the railing. Below us, Clement Street moved with its Friday evening traffic. People with bags from the grocery store, couples walking close together in the cold, a kid on a bicycle weaving between parked cars. He's gone. I asked, though I already knew. Gone, she confirmed. November. He'd been talking to someone in Chicago apparently. A new situation. She paused. I heard from Christine Daly's friend. He borrowed money from his new. She stopped. Anyway, I agreed. I filed on him. I know. Priya told me. I looked at her. Good. She nodded. We were quiet for a moment. The city hummed below us. The orange light was fading to something deeper, something richer, the color of embers. I lent him money in September, she said. Not a lot. But I knew him by then. I thought I knew him. And I lent it anyway. She turned her wine glass between her hands. I think I was already starting to see it and I didn't want to. That's the hardest part, I said. Not the not knowing. The knowing and choosing not to. She looked at me. You'd already been collecting the folder for months by then. Yes. You weren't sure it would work out the way it did. No, I said honestly. I wasn't. You could have lost. I could have, I said. But I had documentation on every single thing I'd ever done for that family. And I had 8 months of documenting what he was doing. What I couldn't control was the outcome. What I could control was the quality of the record. I took a sip of wine. That's accounting really. You can't guarantee the future. You can guarantee you understand the present. Brianna was quiet for a long moment. I'm opening a savings account, she said finally. A real one. With a physical bank. Not linked to anything shared. She said it with the specific tentative pride of a person announcing the first step of something larger. Good, I said. Will you help me set it up? I looked at her. My sister. 24 years old in a good green coat on my balcony, asking me to help her do something basic and necessary, which was the specific language of someone beginning to trust themselves and wanting a witness to it. Yes, I said. I'll help you set it up. We stood there a little longer. The wine was good. The city was beautiful in the winter dark. At some point Brianna said something that made me laugh. Something about Marcus's pressed suit at the meeting, how she'd spent 40 minutes that morning ironing it, how she now understood that she had ironed the suit of the man who was actively dismantling her family's finances, which was in retrospect the most absurd detail in a story full of them. And I laughed properly, the real kind, and she laughed too, and it felt like something releasing, like a knot that had been quietly there for months finally giving way. I raised my glass. To better financial hygiene, I said. She raised hers. And to changing the locks back, she said. I looked at her. She smiled. Mom changed them again. After Marcus left. She gave me the new key last week. Pause. She gave me one for you too. Said to tell you it was waiting whenever you wanted it. I thought about that. About the brass key worn smooth at the tip. About welcome mats and porch lights and the specific complicated geometry of family. How it can be the source of the wound and the salve for it, sometimes simultaneously, sometimes in close enough succession that the difference is almost philosophical. Tell her thank you, I said. You could tell her yourself, Brianna said. Sunday dinner. She made the thing with the pasta. The baked ziti? The baked ziti. I turned my wine glass once. Below us, a cyclist rang their bell at someone crossing the street. Clear and small in the winter air. A man walked a dog the size of a coffee table. Two women were laughing over something at the bus stop on the corner, their breath making small clouds in the cold. I thought about Marcus Hale in a new city, in a new situation, carrying his slim portfolio and his 3 duffel bags and his talent for finding the gaps in other people's arrangements. I thought about Abina Osei and her savings, which had been returned partially. The AG's reopened case had resulted in a restitution order that Marcus had complied with to the tune of $4,300 before the investigators' attention moved to the Chicago matter. I thought about Renata Osei calling me to say thank you and how she'd cried briefly and then apologized for crying, and I told her there was nothing to apologize for. I thought about my father, who had called me the previous Sunday to ask if I knew anything about small business succession planning, because a neighbor of his was asking and he'd told him he might know someone. I'd said I did in fact know something about that. I thought about the folder. Renamed closed. Filed in archive. Here is what I know now that I didn't know 3 years ago at the kitchen table in the house on Crestfield Drive, going through my parents' finances at 26 years old with a cup of coffee and a sense of clear, uncomplicated obligation. Generosity without documentation is not generosity. It's exposure. Not because the people you love will inevitably betray you. Most of them won't, most of them are genuinely trying, but because love and money occupy the same space in families and they have different grammars, and when someone with a gift for one grammar enters a space that was built in the other, the resulting confusion is a gift to them and a disaster to everyone else. I was generous without documentation, and I was lucky that when the moment came I had, by professional habit, documented everything anyway. Not everyone is that lucky. Some people give 3 years of their income and their labor and their problem-solving and their love to a family that needs it, and when someone comes along and rearranges the story, they have nothing to point to but their own memory, which is the least defensible evidence in any room. Write things down. Get them signed. Not because you don't trust the people you love. Because trust is not the same as protection, and the people who might one day try to use your generosity against you are rarely the people you love. They're the ones who arrive later, who read the room and identify the gaps and move into them before you've noticed the door was open. I had been lucky. I had been prepared. I had in the end not lost anything that mattered. The orange glow had deepened to bronze. Brianna was finishing her wine. The city was fully alive below us now, the way cities are on winter evenings when the cold pushes people inside toward warmth and light and the streets take on a certain vivid, cinematic quality. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about what you take back. It's about what you build in the space they thought they'd emptied. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about what you take back. It's about becoming, quietly and completely, exactly the person they assumed they could afford to underestimate. I was building. I was building every day. And for that, for the alarm that had shaken loose everything that needed to go, for the confrontation that had made the documentation necessary, for the lock I hadn't been able to open that had sent me to a hotel room with a glass of wine and a laptop and a folder called contingency, for all of that I was, in the specific, private, unperformable way of someone who has arrived somewhere true, grateful. I finished my wine. Sunday, I said to Brianna. She looked up, smiled. Sunday, she confirmed. And the city stretched out below us, lit and alive and full of ordinary evenings, and I stood in mine and let it be enough. Which it was, which it more than was, and I thought, this is what it looks like when you win. Not the conference room. Not the signed agreement. Not Marcus Hale's compressed, expressionless signature on a document that cost him everything he'd built in 4 months. This. A balcony. Sister. A glass emptied of good wine. The city below going about its life. The work waiting inside, on the desk, in the open laptop, in the growing file of new clients and new cases and new people who needed someone to sit across from them at a kitchen table and say I can fix this and mean it. This was what it looked like. And it was everything.